The air in the courtroom was thick with a smug silence. My ex-husband, Mark, sat at the plaintiff's table, a faint, confident smirk playing on his lips. He was looking at me, his eyes filled not with sadness for a marriage ending, but with the greedy glint of a predator who thinks he's cornered his prey. His lawyer had just finished a soaring speech about Mark's emotional suffering and his invaluable, non-financial contributions to our marriage. He was demanding $1 million settlement, plus our home and half the value of my company. My company. The one I had built from nothing in my parents' garage while he was out networking with his friends at golf courses and expensive restaurants. The judge, an older woman with a tired expression, peered down at me over her glasses, ready to deliver a ruling that would likely lean on precedent and compromise, a solution that would reward his audacity. He didn't realize that his lawsuit, this grand performance of greed and entitlement, was the very trap I had been waiting for him to step into. Every lie his lawyer told, every false claim Mark made under oath, was just tightening the noose he'd unknowingly placed around his own neck. He thought he was putting me on trial, but the entire time, I was the one gathering the evidence for his final judgment. For months, I had been the silent audience to his crimes, watching him through the unblinking eye of a hidden camera, waiting for the perfect moment to pull back the curtain. And that moment was now. My heart wasn't pounding with fear, but with the slow, steady beat of retribution. I stood up, my hands perfectly steady. "Your Honor," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet room. "Before you make your decision, I have something I believe the court needs to see." His smug expression faltered for just a second, replaced by a flicker of confusion. He thought this was just another one of my futile attempts to fight back. Another emotional plea from the woman he had spent years trying to break. He thought he had taken everything from me already. My trust, my love, my money. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The lawsuit demanding $1 million from me wasn't just an insult. It was my best piece of evidence. The final public act of his treachery that would justify everything I was about to do. You might be wondering why I let it get this far. Why I let him drag my name through the mud in a public courtroom. The answer begins with a broken promise, a hidden camera, and the discovery that the man I married wasn't just unfaithful, but a criminal mastermind targeting me from the day he said, "I do." To understand how I ended up there, you have to understand how I began. I've always been the fixer in my family, the scapegoat. I have an older brother who was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. If he got bad grades, it was because the teacher was unfair. If I got bad grades, it was because I wasn't trying hard enough. When he crashed his car, my parents bought him a new one. When my laptop broke, the one I needed for my coding classes, I was told to get a job and learn the value of $1. So I did. I learned to rely on no one but myself. While my friends were going to parties, I was in my parents' garage, teaching myself programming languages, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning need to prove I was worth something. That's where my software company was born. It started small, just a single app I designed to help small businesses manage their inventory. But it was good, it worked, and it was all mine. Then I met Mark. He was everything my life wasn't. He was smooth, charismatic, and full of grand speeches about his future. He called himself a business development consultant, a title vague enough to sound impressive without meaning much of anything. He lavished me with attention, praising my ambition and my intelligence. For the first time, I felt seen. He listened to my dreams about my company, nodding with what I mistook for genuine admiration. He told me I was a genius, a visionary, and that with him by my side, we could conquer the world. I was so starved for validation that I devoured every word. He met my family and they adored him, seeing him as a successful, outgoing man they always wished I could be with. When he introduced me to his parents, they were just as charming. His mother, Eleanor, hugged me tightly and called me the daughter she never had. She gushed about Mark, her brilliant son, who just needed one good break to show the world his potential. They painted a picture of a tight-knit, loving family, and they invited me in with open arms. I thought I had finally found the acceptance I had craved my whole life. I didn't see the fine print. I didn't understand that their love was conditional, that in their eyes, I wasn't a person, I was a resource. I was the good break they had all been waiting for. My success wasn't going to be my own, it was going to be theirs. We got married a year later. The wedding was beautiful, paid for entirely by the first major contract my company landed. I told myself it was an investment in our future. At the reception, Mark's father gave a toast, not to me or to us, but to his son's brilliant future, beaming as if Mark himself had signed the deal that paid for the champagne they were all drinking. That should have been my first clue. Soon after, we bought a beautiful house in a gated community, again, with my money. I put his name on the deed without a second thought. I thought we were a team, that my success was our success. What a fool I was. I was a software CEO who couldn't read the most basic human code. Once we were married, Mark's consulting career became even more demanding of my finances. There was always a new venture, a new can't-miss opportunity that just needed a little seed money. First, it was $20,000 for a crypto trading bot he was developing with a friend. The money vanished. Then it was $50,000 to become a silent partner in a new luxury car rental business. The business folded in 6 months. Each time he failed, he had a perfectly crafted excuse. The market wasn't right. His partners were unreliable. It was never his fault. And through it all, his mother, Eleanor, would call me. She wouldn't ask about my company or my stress. Instead, she'd tell me how proud she was of me for supporting Mark. "He's a visionary, dear," she'd say in her syrupy voice. "Men like him need a strong woman to handle the practical things so they can focus on the big picture." The practical things meant my company. The small app I built in a garage was now a legitimate business with 20 employees and 7-figure revenues. But in our home, it was treated like my little hobby. When I worked late, pulling all-nighters to fix a bug or meet a client deadline, Mark would sigh and complain that I wasn't making him a priority. He and his mother slowly convinced me that my role was to be the stable, quiet foundation upon which his magnificent future would be built. They gaslit me into believing my tangible success was less important than his imaginary potential. I was the engine, but they were convinced he was the driver, simply because he held a map to a place called someday. The ultimate symbol of my role in their family arrived in the form of Mark's younger sister, Chloe. She was the family's golden child, a princess who had never worked a day in her life and saw no reason to start. While I was building a business, she was building her social media following. While I was managing payroll, she was managing a closet full of designer handbags, many of which were purchased with credit cards linked to accounts funded by me. In her parents' eyes, Chloe's purpose was simply to be adored. And in Mark's eyes, her happiness was a reflection of his status as a successful provider-type older brother. The only problem was that he wasn't providing anything. I was. The first major expense was her wedding. It was a gaudy, over-the-top affair with a 5-course meal, a live band, and a guest list of over 300 people. The total cost came to just under $100,000. When the bill came, Mark presented it to me with a smile, as if he were giving me a gift. "Chloe is so excited," he said. "She knows how much you love her." When I hesitated, my stomach churning at the sheer audacity, his face clouded over. "Don't be selfish," he said, his voice turning cold. "This is what families do for each other. Or are you not part of this family?" His mother called me the next day. "We're all so grateful for your generosity, dear," Eleanor cooed. "It's wonderful that you're successful enough to give Chloe the wedding she's always dreamed of. Mark is such a good man for making it happen." He took all the credit. At the wedding, he stood up and gave a speech about the importance of family and how he was so proud to be in a position to give his little sister her fairy tale day. People applauded him, patting him on the back. I sat at the table, invisible, writing the check in my head. A year later, it was the down payment for her first house. Then it was a new car for her birthday. Each time, I was the anonymous benefactor, and Mark was the celebrated hero. If I ever dared to question the expense, I was subjected to a united front of emotional manipulation from Mark and his mother. I was stingy. I was cold. I didn't understand family. They had me so twisted up in guilt and self-doubt that I started to believe them. I was the outsider, the ATM, whose only value was the money I could provide. The breaking point came during a quarterly review for my company. We had lost a major client, and our projected revenue was down for the first time since I'd started the business. It wasn't a catastrophe, but it was a serious issue that required all my attention and, more importantly, careful cash flow management. That same week, Mark came to me and announced that his parents, Eleanor and Robert, were thinking of retiring. He suggested we help them out by buying their house from them for well above its market value, allowing them to cash out and travel, while we would just hold onto it as an investment property. He had the paperwork all ready. He was asking me for $600,000. It was so brazen, so completely disconnected from our financial reality, that for the first time, the fog of manipulation began to clear. I told him no. It was the first time I had ever given him a hard no on a major financial request. The charming facade didn't just crack, it shattered. His face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. He called me ungrateful and selfish. He said I was trying to control him with my money, the very money he felt entitled to. He stormed out and didn't come home for 2 days. When he returned, he was cold and distant. He moved into the guest room, claiming he needed space. He started taking all his calls in his home office, always with the door locked. He was more secretive than ever, his phone perpetually glued to his hand, angled away from me. That's when I started digging. I wasn't looking for a corporate conspiracy. My mind went to a much simpler, more common betrayal. I thought he was having an affair. I imagined he was siphoning our money to support a secret life with another woman. The thought was painful, but it made a twisted kind of sense. It would explain the secrecy, the cruelty, the missing funds from our joint accounts that I now saw clear as day in the bank statements. Thousands of dollars being moved to accounts I didn't recognize. I needed proof. I needed to know what was happening behind that locked office door. So, one afternoon, when he was out for one of his long lunches, I bought the best hidden camera I could find, a tiny device disguised as a USB phone charger. I placed it on the power strip under his desk, where it had a perfect, unobstructed view of his chair and computer screen. I thought I was about to uncover an affair. The truth, I would soon learn, was infinitely worse. That night, after Mark had gone to the guest room and the house was finally silent, I poured myself a glass of wine I couldn't taste and opened my laptop. My hands trembled as I logged into the camera's secure cloud storage. The first few video files showed nothing interesting. Mark on the phone, scrolling through websites, looking bored. For a moment, I felt a wave of shame. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the money had a simple explanation, and his cruelty was just a reaction to the stress I was under. Then I clicked on a file from the previous afternoon. The video opened with Mark pacing his office. The door opened, but it wasn't some mysterious woman who walked in. It was his father, Robert. Robert didn't look like a feeble retiree. He looked like a co-conspirator. He sat down opposite Mark, and they immediately leaned in close. I turned up the volume, my ear pressed against the speaker. "Did you get the latest source code build?" Robert asked, his voice low and urgent. My blood ran cold. Mark nodded. "Yeah, it's on this drive," he said, tapping a flash drive on the desk. "She's so stupid. She uses the same password for everything. I have full access to her company's servers. Our developers said they can reverse engineer the core algorithm in less than a month." Robert smiled, a predatory grin I had never seen before. "Good. Once we launch, we'll undercut her prices by 30%. We can even poach her top clients before she knows what hit her. By the time she figures it out, her company will be worthless." I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't an affair. It was a corporate heist, orchestrated by my own husband and his father, using my own home as their headquarters. I kept watching, my horror turning into a cold, hard rage. An hour later, his mother, Eleanor, came in. She wasn't the gentle, supportive mother-in-law. She was a vulture. "How is our little project coming along?" she asked. Mark bragged about his progress, and Eleanor clapped her hands softly. "Oh, brilliant, darling. She deserves it. All that time tapping away on her little computer while real men do the work." She then looked straight at the camera, not seeing it, but seeing me in her mind. "She's a useful fool, but her usefulness is about to run out." They went on to discuss the money they'd been siphoning into shell accounts, calling it our retirement fund. Every word was a confirmation. My marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a hostile takeover. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't storm into the guest room and smash the laptop over Mark's head. I just sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen illuminating the truth, and I felt a profound and terrifying calm wash over me. The woman who had been so desperate for their approval, the naive girl who thought love could be earned through sacrifice, died in that chair. In her place sat a CEO whose most valuable asset had just been targeted for corporate espionage, and I knew exactly how to handle it. My grief was instantly replaced by strategy. They had made a fatal error. They underestimated me. They saw me as an emotional, gullible woman. They were about to meet the ruthless businesswoman who had built a company from scratch. The next morning, I went to work as if nothing had happened. I made coffee. I smiled politely at Mark when we passed in the hallway. I played the part of the slightly distant but dutiful wife, the role they had written for me. He had no idea that the moment I walked into my office, I wasn't working on client projects. I was dismantling his entire scheme. My first call wasn't to a divorce lawyer, but to a top-tier corporate security firm. Within hours, a team was discreetly working overnight to perform a complete overhaul of my company's digital infrastructure. We migrated everything to new servers, implemented two-factor authentication on all accounts, and conducted a sweep that revealed the backdoor Mark had been using to access my data. We closed it. The flash drive he had given his father was now just a useless piece of plastic. My next call was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a bulldog known for high-stakes, fraudulent divorces. I paid her a substantial retainer and laid out the entire story, providing her with the initial video clips. She watched them, her expression grim. "Don't file yet," she advised. "Let them keep digging their own hole. The more evidence we have, the better." So I waited. For 2 more weeks, I lived in that house, a ghost in my own life. I downloaded the camera footage every single day, documenting every incriminating conversation. I watched them laugh about their plans. I watched them plot my downfall. And with every video file I saved, my resolve hardened. Finally, my lawyer gave me the green light. My assets were secured. My company was a fortress. I had everything I needed. One Tuesday afternoon, while Mark was golfing with a potential investor, a process server walked up to him on the 12th hole and handed him divorce papers. Mark was completely blindsided. He came home that evening in a fury. The divorce papers crumpled in his fist. The charming mask was gone, replaced by the snarling, entitled man I'd seen on the hidden camera footage. He swung between begging and threatening. First, he tried to tell me I was making a huge mistake, that we were so close to making it big. Then, he accused me of being hysterical and irrational. "You can't do this," he yelled. "I have put years of my life into supporting you, into building this family." I just looked at him with dead eyes and said, "Get out of my house, Mark." The words were quiet, but they were made of steel. He finally realized I wasn't playing a game. The next day, the calls started. First, it was his mother, Eleanor. Her syrupy voice was gone, replaced with a venomous hiss. She called me a wicked, ungrateful witch. She accused me of trying to destroy her son after everything he had done for me. His father, Robert, got on the phone and tried a different tactic, attempting to bully me by threatening to ruin my reputation in the community. They launched a full-scale smear campaign. They told our neighbors and the few friends we shared that I was having a mental breakdown, that the stress of running a business had made me paranoid and cruel. They were trying to paint me as the villain, the unstable woman who would soon lose everything. All the while, the hidden camera in the office kept recording them as they strategized, confident that I was just flailing. Their arrogance was their undoing. After a month of realizing their emotional manipulation had no effect on me anymore, they made their final, fatal move. I received a thick envelope from Mark's new lawyer. It was a lawsuit. Inside, the pages detailed a work of fiction so audacious I almost had to admire it. He was demanding $1 million settlement, sole ownership of our house, and 50% of my company. And the justification? He claimed that he was a secret genius behind my success. He alleged that his strategic guidance and emotional labor were the primary reasons the company had flourished. He was the visionary, and I was merely the technician who executed his brilliant ideas. His parents had both signed sworn affidavits supporting his claims, perjuring themselves by stating they had personally witnessed him mentoring me and developing business strategies. They had put all their lies in writing. They had handed me the gun and the bullets. My lawyer's response when I forwarded her the documents was a single, beautiful sentence. "We've got them." And so, we arrived back where we started, in that stuffy courtroom. The months of waiting were over. It was time for the final act. Mark's lawyer, a slick man with a cheap suit and an overly confident smile, presented their case with dramatic flair. He painted Mark as a tragic hero, a brilliant man who had set aside his own ambitions to support his wife's humble dream. He used phrases like the silent partner and the emotional bedrock of my success. He portrayed me as a cold, unfeeling tech mogul who had used her husband's kindness and then discarded him like a piece of outdated hardware. I sat at my table, my expression neutral, watching the performance without a flicker of emotion. Then Mark took the stand. It was the performance of a lifetime. He choked up as he described the late nights he spent brainstorming ideas for my company. He detailed imaginary conversations where he supposedly gave me the key insights that led to my biggest contracts. He looked at the judge, his eyes welling with crocodile tears, and spoke of the pain of being made to feel invisible in his own home. "All I ever wanted was for her to succeed," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "I just never thought her success would mean there was no room left for me." Several people in the gallery looked at him with sympathy. He was believable. His lies were well rehearsed. Next, his mother took the stand to corroborate his story. Eleanor, dressed in a conservative gray suit to look more credible, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. She told the court how she had watched her son pour his heart and soul into my business. "He sacrificed everything for her," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He would come to me, so worried about her, so dedicated to helping her. To see her treat him like this, it's just inhuman." When she was done, she shot me a look of pure, triumphant malice. They thought they had won. They had presented a compelling narrative of a wronged man and a heartless wife. They were sitting at their table, smug and self-assured, waiting for the judge to validate their fantasy and award them their jackpot. They had no idea that the real trial was just about to begin. My lawyer stood up. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the defense calls no witnesses. However, we would like to present new evidence that has recently come to our attention." A low murmur went through the courtroom. Mark's lawyer stood up, objecting on the grounds that they hadn't seen this evidence. My lawyer calmly produced a time-stamped log showing that the evidence had been delivered to his office the day before, meeting the legal requirement. The lawyer, flustered, sat back down. The judge, her curiosity piqued, nodded. "Proceed," she said. A large monitor was rolled to the center of the courtroom, and the bailiff dimmed the overhead lights. Mark was still smirking, whispering something to his lawyer. He thought this was a bluff. The first video file began to play. The screen showed the inside of Mark's home office, and there he was, clear as day, talking to his father. The audio was pristine, captured by the high-quality microphone. The entire courtroom heard Robert ask, "Did you get the latest source code build?" They heard my husband, the man who had just tearfully testified about supporting me, reply, "Yeah. She's so stupid. She uses the same password for everything." The smirk on the real Mark's face vanished, replaced by a ghastly, pale shock. His eyes darted from the screen to me, then to the judge. His father, sitting in the front row of the gallery, looked like he had been turned to stone. Before he could even process it, my lawyer said, "Next clip, please." The video changed. Now it was Mark and his mother, Eleanor. The courtroom heard her sweet, motherly voice turn to poison as she called me a useful fool. They heard her laugh as Mark bragged about how he was going to dismantle my life's work. Eleanor let out a small, strangled gasp from the gallery. The woman who had performed so convincingly on the stand was now exposed as a cruel, vindictive accomplice. The sympathy that had been in the room moments before had curdled into stunned silence. "And one final clip, Your Honor," my lawyer announced, her voice like ice. The last video played. This time, it was Mark and his father explicitly discussing the shell companies, the specific account numbers, and the amounts they had already funneled away. They were laughing about their retirement fund, built entirely from my money. It was a full confession, not just to a plan, but to crimes already committed. When the screen went black, the only sound was the faint hum of the monitor. Mark sat frozen at his table, his face ashen. He was no longer a wronged husband. He was a common thief, a fraud, and a criminal, exposed in a court of law by his own words. The trap had closed. For a long moment, the judge just stared at Mark. Her expression was no longer tired. It was one of pure, unadulterated fury. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose, not in weariness, but as if to contain her temper. When she spoke, her voice was low and dangerous, each word landing like a hammer blow. "Mr. Peterson," she said to Mark's lawyer, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "In 20 years on this bench, I have never witnessed such a brazen, malicious, and fraudulent abuse of the legal system. Your client and his family have not only wasted this court's time, but they have committed perjury and, based on the evidence presented, conspired to commit multiple felonies." She then turned her gaze to Mark. "The plaintiff's case is dismissed with extreme prejudice," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. "You will not receive 1 cent. Not the house, not a share of the company, nothing." But she wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she continued, "I am ordering a transcript of this proceeding, along with a copy of all evidence presented by the defense, to be sent immediately to the district attorney's office with my strongest recommendation for a criminal investigation into conspiracy, wire fraud, intellectual property theft, and perjury." Panic erupted. Mark tried to stand up and speak, but his lawyer pulled him down, whispering frantically. Eleanor let out a sob from the gallery, no longer acting. It was the sound of a woman whose entire world had just been set on fire. The judge wasn't moved. She looked to the bailiffs. "See that no one from the Peterson family leaves the courthouse. I imagine detectives from the white-collar crime division will want to speak with them shortly." It happened faster than I could have imagined. Within the hour, detectives had arrived. I watched, a silent observer from the hallway, as Mark, his father Robert, and his mother Eleanor were all questioned and then formally arrested. The last I saw of them, they were being led out a side door in handcuffs, their heads bowed in shame, the flash of a news photographer's camera illuminating their public disgrace. The investigation later uncovered the money trail leading directly to Chloe's house and car. She too was charged with receiving stolen property, her perfect, curated life collapsing into the same criminal nightmare that had consumed the rest of her family. The legal battle that followed was a formality. The video evidence was undeniable. Mark and his father were found guilty of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and theft of intellectual property. They both received prison sentences. Eleanor was convicted of perjury and conspiracy, receiving a lighter sentence but a permanent criminal record that shattered her carefully crafted social standing. Chloe, the golden child, lost everything. The house, the car, and her reputation were all stripped away as the proceeds of her family's crimes were seized. The justice was as absolute as their betrayal had been. They had conspired to take everything from me, and in the end, they lost everything themselves. My company, free from the financial leeches and the psychological weight of their deception, flourished in a way I had only dreamed of. With my focus clear and my energy no longer diverted to managing a parasitic husband, I led my team to develop new products that revolutionized our corner of the market. My success became my own, in my name and on my terms. I sold the house that had been their headquarters, a place filled with ghosts and bad memories, and bought a smaller place for myself, one filled with light and peace. I was no longer the scapegoat, the fixer, or the ATM. I was simply me. I sometimes think about the woman who was so desperate for a family's approval that she was willing to erase herself. The pain of that betrayal was immense, but it was also a crucible. It burned away the naive girl who sought her value in the eyes of others and forged the woman I am today, a woman who understands that self-worth isn't something someone else can give you. It's something you build, protect, and, if necessary, fight for. The whole ordeal started because my ex-husband demanded $1 million. He thought it was the price of my silence and submission. But what he really did was hand me the bill for my own freedom. And it was a price I was more than willing to make him pay. My life is quiet now, but it's not empty. It's full of my own work, my own accomplishments, and my own future. A future I built not on a broken promise, but on the solid foundation of my own strength,